right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I have a few housekeeping items before we start. Microsoft Teams has made some changes to the platform to accommodate more videos on the screen, so now 9 participants will now be included. Please turn your video off to avoid sharing your video with this group. Due to the number of participants today, we've automatically muted your phones to eliminate any interferences. Please enter any questions or comments into the chat box. We really encourage questions. This is a really great topic, and it's personal to a lot of people, and I think it applies to everyone. So hopefully you all have a lot of great questions to share with us. If you are not able to view the chat section, you're also able to email any questions to professional@asce.org. Again, that is professional@asce.org. Also, please close all your applications, especially email, so that your system will run smoothly. And please keep all conversation geared towards the benefit of the community and today's topic. So with that being said, today's roundtable will focus on preventing emotional, physical, and mental burnout during COVID-19. We have an excellent team of panelists today. Thank you all again for joining us. So it is my pleasure to welcome you, and we want to go ahead and start off with some introductions. Chuck, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, and welcome. I'm glad to be part of this. My name is Chuck Black from Charleston, South Carolina. Environmental engineer with a environmental consulting firm called S&ME. Been doing this as a project manager environmental for 28 years now, and kind of moved on up into a business development managerial role. Enjoy what I do very much, and this is one of the few days I haven't been in my office here joining you guys, but it's been a crazy time, and I'm glad we get to talk about it. As far as ASCE goes, local branch president, past president, section president, moved on to be a governor for my Region 4, then became a director for Region 4, and now serving as on the board of governors for the Geo Institute. And want to say happy birthday to our president, Guna.
Wow, is it his birthday today, Chuck?
No, it was this
We
week.
just missed it, right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Well, happy birthday, Guna.
Thank you.
Awesome. Kyle, you are next on our list. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Tirza. Really happy to be here today. My name is Kyle Gillis. I'm a recent graduate from West Virginia University. Started a company about 2 years ago called Iconic Air. Essentially, Iconic Air is a startup, and we're planning to we were making software for the next generation emissions compliance and leak detection market for oil and gas, industrial hygiene, a lot of different areas. But I'm happy to be here on the panel today. I'm looking to bring a unique perspective of a unique graduate and kind of what it's been like for me, not being in the workforce that long and quickly switching to COVID-19 conditions, and happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Kyle. I know it's hard enough to make that transition, but you've had to do it under very difficult circumstances. Jamila, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Hi, sure, yes. First of all, I thought I almost shared the birthday with our president here, because today is my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thanks. So, yes, my name is Jamila Mohammad Ingram. I am a lead structural engineer in the Washington, D.C. office of WSP USA. I specialize in bridges and have experience in property acquisition as well. I was really, inspired by the built environment in my hometown, Chicago, to pursue this career in the first place. And I always credit my parents for their positive influences, and my engineer husband is very supportive as well. As far as ASCE is concerned, I became actively involved in the Illinois section of ASCE through the Structural Engineering Institute, and now I serve as secretary and collegiate lead for the Education Committee in the National Capital section. So I also enjoy being a topic moderator on ASCE Collaborate. So regarding this topic, I am a strong advocate of finding work-life balance to prevent burnout.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jamila. I know you have a lot of really great advice to share with us today. Erin, you're next. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me on this panel. So I'm Erin Stieber. I work with Banner Associates in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I am a mom, so I'm representing that category today. So I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. And so it was very interesting having them home with me home, and my husband is a teacher. So all four of us were working from home for several months, I guess we'll say. So that was an interesting balance. And I am also the designated shopper. That's relaxed just a little bit, but my husband has some health issues. So I'm the one that goes out and gets stuff if we need it. So balancing work and balancing home life and things like that has been really interesting. So can't say I'm an expert, but I've definitely learned some things along the way. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, Erin.
Hey, Guna, how are you?
Thank you for joining us, Erin. That's what this, is all about. No one's an expert, right? But everyone has some expertise to bring to the table. So really excited about hearing all of your different perspectives and kind of how you've handled these very difficult and challenging times. For our kickoff question, I'll ask, what situations are you currently facing during COVID-19 that you could see leading to burnout? Are you working more than before? Are you having to balance multiple roles? You just mentioned, Erin, being the designated shopper. That's, a great example. Are you experiencing higher levels of stress? Chuck, do you want to go ahead and start off about kind of your unique situation?
Sure, I'll be glad to. And me personally, I am probably more of an optimist, glass half full type of guy. I found it very comforting for me to keep my same routine. I don't have small kids at home. They're both in college, and I was able to keep my daily schedule. South Carolina wasn't one of the mandatory shutdown states. We closed a lot of things, but engineering and construction was allowed to stay open. Traffic situation, except for today, has been wonderful. So I've been commuting to the office just like normal. I tell people it's free coffee and toilet paper. I've really enjoyed being able to social distance at work just fine. And I know we're going to talk about employees that are stressed too. So it hadn't affected me personally, but what it has done is the folks, like Erin's situation, I've got employees that are home and have to stay home. And keeping them connected to the office, it's not like they're not missing anything. I'm able to get files for them and do things that they need to be done in the office, so they don't miss not having to be there. I think has been kind of maybe I'm using my position to kind of help ground the folks that can't come in every day like that. But the other personal thing, and we can get back to it later, is part of the as a project manager, the seller doer type mode. Really hard to do that now. You can't meet somebody after work. You can't go to an ASC meeting. You can't, stop and have a beer on the way home with a potential client. Makes it that much tougher to make connections and do things. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, more this hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, do you want to talk about your specific situation and how things have changed during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And just to paint the picture a little more full here, right? I'm the co-founder of a startup company who has 5 to 6 employees, and basically, I would see the startup world kind of reflective of a new graduate who's going into the workforce as an engineer for a very more demanding or results-driven company. So the idea is that you need to maybe put in a few more hours, and you do things. You have to get the result in order to stay alive. For anyone who's not familiar with the startup world, it's more like over a 6-month period to 8-month period. Do we have the money to keep things moving in order to meet those quotas and to be able to continue to deliver good products to customers and do things with such a weird future ahead of us where we're not sure what's around the corner? We have to make sure we're hitting these markers kind of day in and day out. And that is very different compared to kind of how we started the company, where we would go into the office and we'd all be there together and we'd understand what each other are working on and feel more productive, right? And instead, now we're going into our homes, and everyone's, as Chuck alluded to, all of our circumstances are a little different, right? whether it's you have a family, whether it's you're living with roommates like myself. If you guys hear some country music in the background in a second, it's because I'm living with several 20-year-olds right now. Several of them working on the company with me here. So just giving everyone a heads up. But I'm sure we'll talk about more of this in a minute. And I have some personal stories of how I've been trying to handle that, and look forward to talking about.
Absolutely. We look forward to hearing those, Kyle. Erin, do you want to talk about specifically kind of some of the things that have changed with you and how you're handling burnout during COVID-19?
Sure, yeah. So I would say it's been very unique for me. I am not one to stay at home, and so it was it was a big transition for me to be at home. And actually, I survived the first week. I went out like maybe once. I've been outside of my house, but just not going anywhere. And so the transition actually, I kept really busy, and so that helped. But looking at my kids being in school, thankfully my husband's a teacher, so he could help out a lot with that. The kids having just getting set up and making sure that they were doing what they needed to do throughout the day. And so I would pop in and say hi and make sure that they were doing what they needed to do. And that was really beneficial for the kids to know that I was, still, looking out for them and being there. And then just balancing my time with work. Sometimes, you're not able to focus on everything throughout the 8 to 5 day. And so I would get up earlier in the morning or work a little bit later, trying to make up that access time that I wasn't able to devote during the day. There's been a lot of team meetings and Zoom meetings and sharing screens and that type of thing. So I think communicating with your coworkers and your bosses and making sure that everyone knows your schedule and any of your difficulties that you're coming into ahead of time. If you've got a busy week coming up and you know that you're just not going to be able to do everything in that time, just letting your boss know or your coworkers know ahead of time so that they're not surprised at the end of the week. That's been very helpful for me, I guess.
Yeah, communication is so very important, especially, when people have different responsibilities and family obligations. So important. Jamila, do you want to talk a little bit about, how things have changed for you and how you're handling ways to try to avoid burnout?
Well, sure. I've been experiencing higher levels of stress and concern due to the pandemic itself and my grief over the death of Mr. George Floyd and the racial climate. So that's given me a heavy heart. Also, lines have blurred between my work and home environment. At the onset, I preferred to have a designated workspace, but this really just went all out of the window. Like, I live in the city with limited space, so I've had to take conference calls in places where I've historically gone to find my zen. So that's kind of bothered me a bit. But nevertheless, working from home during this period is certainly a special benefit. And to keep moving forward, I remind myself that the civil engineering projects we're working on are going to help people thrive in the future. So I am very hopeful because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Very difficult time, right? The past week, right when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it got
Absolutely.
worse. So yeah, these are, very difficult, very stressful times, and it's, hard to relate to other people and understand how they're handling the stress of today's world. We kind of want to switch back to some past experiences and see, how you all have handled some stressful situations in the past, and what you've done to avoid burnout from those past experiences, and what can we learn from those. Erin, is that something that you can share with us?
Sure. Well, I think work-life balance has definitely been something that has been a struggle, and not having enough time in the day. It seems like sleep is super important to help reduce stress. So I tend to reduce my sleeping times when I feel like I've got too much going on. But I do combat that with some yoga and some meditation. I've been using, there's a lot of apps out there. So I definitely recommend, if you feel like you're stressed out or you're having a crazy week, just, pull up an app. Headspace is free. They've got a paid for platform as well, but I find that to be really beneficial. It walks you through, the meditation, and it doesn't press you into, your mind may wander, and you just have to bring it back, and it's fine. It's still benefiting you. So I also exercise a lot, just to I deal with high blood pressure every once in a while, and so in order to maintain a good blood pressure without medicine, I definitely have to get my workouts in. So I go for a run. It's great to reduce stress. So I have to make sure that I can fit that in. So it's definitely been helpful to me to make sure that I'm using these different avenues, and also just talking with my mentors and talking with my coworkers. Like yesterday, I was on a call with 3 of my coworkers that I haven't, seen since I started working from home, basically. And at the end of the call, we just kind of had a little bit of a banter, at the end, just to kind of catch up on how things are. And so it was great to just connect that way. I also have, I'm in a book club with 8 people, and so we've been getting together. We used to get together twice a month, and now we do weekly Zoom calls and parking lot meetings, so we can spread out and be outside. So just to connect with people and make sure that I'm, connecting with people and reducing my stress that way. And then also just making sure I'm checking in with my clients and projects and my team quite frequently. You're not just down the hallway, or it's not as easy to just see how things are going. And so just calling them up and, sharing screens and seeing how things are going and checking in, a little bit more frequently than I had in the past, seems to be making sure that we're all on the same page and keeping up with what we need to be doing. So.
Yeah, that's some great advice. Kyle, do you want to go ahead and share some of the things that you've done in the past to avoid burnout and handle stressful situations?
Yeah, for sure, Tirza. But real quick, this is amazing. This chat room, I cannot believe how many people are joining this right now. You guys have a lot of people following this, and this is awesome. To piggyback off what Jamila's saying, blurred lines could not be the better thing to highlight or exacerbate this whole thing, right? For me, I'm a recent graduate. I have a semi-new girlfriend of 6 months to a year where we're hanging out all the time. There's work that needs to be done. There's other stuff of me calling my parents, checking in with family. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, revolutionary through COVID, Black Lives Matter, everything. It's just all over the board. And how do you find any time to get over this is something I'm still learning from. And I'm sure you guys have more of an opinion on than I do, with so many more data points and experience of how to handle these things. But for me personally, it's been hilarious. My friends just make fun of me constantly left and right, because I went from this hard 12, 15-hour work days, I'm trying to push person. And next thing I know, I'm kicking off my shoes and I'm like walking a mile down the road in my bare feet in grass, like the most hippie mindset you can imagine, of trying to be like, what is going on? I need to really step out of my zone here and evaluate what's going on in life. And it's just unbelievable, because I never thought would have seen this coming. But I think segmentation for me, right? I think this is something Chuck alluded to this earlier. I think it's different for everyone. I think for myself, segmentation is everything. So for myself, I had to make it clear. All right, listen, 6 to 6 is this working block, and I need to be a little easier on myself if at 12 I'm pounding headache and stuff, and so I just need to, COVID-19, we're in the situation we were at home, take that extra walk. Why not? You know what I mean? Take a little extra time, and I think this is good for recent graduates who are engineers who are now working from home, who need to get work done, but at the same time, now have a little bit more of a flexible schedule to step out or make a phone call or whatever, right? And I do think that companies are supporting this mindset I mean, look at all these companies who are opening up this work from home policy, changing how things are done in the future. I definitely think when we come out of all this, it's going to be that way. But personally, I'm moving towards a hippie mindset, and I'm trying to embrace it. And we'll see, though, because that's not my traditional way.
You'll have to keep us posted on how that goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you kind of have to rethink your perspective to a certain extent. Jamila, do you want to go ahead and share what you've done in the past? Jamila, can you hear us? Are you still there? Uh-oh, it looks like she might be frozen. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question. Maybe Jamila, if you can hear us, maybe you might want to leave and then come back. I know. Oh, there she is. Jamila, can you hear me? Jamila, are you there? Oh, she's gonna leave. All right. We'll move on to our next question. Chuck, I think this one is directed specifically for you, and you've already talked about it, and I think this is one that we are all really interested in. What can engineering leaders do to help their staff prevent burnout during the pandemic? How can managers identify burnout in their staff and help them take action?
I think that's a great question. And, the understanding that people are affected in different ways by this in different situations. It's always been the case, but it really brings it home when people have even different stressors, but similar stresses that affect them differently. I think we need to be aware of that. And what's important is, making sure that we understand that people have their own personal issues, but there's work to be done during the. Mine's not quite as long as Kyle's. At 6 to 6, I'd maybe do 7 to 5 or something like that. But during some of that time, you need to get some work done. And what I think has been very interesting is we've had some of our most productive weeks as a company and as a business unit in April and May. It's fascinating. The running joke is, sure. I mean, if you're home, your boss is interested in watching you. You're probably going to be very efficient, kind of thing. So there's probably a little bit of that, but luckily we had some backlog to take care of. But I know a lot of folks, excuse me, are doing, like Zoom meeting check-ins or whatever, and I haven't done that. We usually share a few emails in the morning. How's everybody doing? If you're on, and if you're off that day, as Aaron mentioned, you just can't walk down the hall and know if somebody's around. So I want to know if they're not there. I won't bug them, and vice versa. And we've had a few all hands on deck meetings. Excuse me, through Teams or Skype or Zoom. But for me, and this really delves into the next part of it, if I can tell somebody's not having a good time, reaching out with a cell phone one-on-one. And just talking to them. And I've done that several times I know you're worried. And yes, there are rumors of layoffs. And yes, work is slowing down over here, but this is picking up. But communication, I guess, and you just mentioned that, is key. Let's celebrate the positive things. We got a new project here, or this contract got expanded, or we won this. Is very helpful for people, knowing that there's some foundation, because what I don't want to do for our employees is compound the risk of your career on top of Floyd and virus and school and summer camp and everything else. You don't need that. So I think the manager should, as normal, take a lot of the heat and make sure his employees and her employees are happy, and at least positive attitudes to get the work done, and communicate so we can share. That's been the biggest thing. And I can't wait to have margarita night with everybody as soon as we can.
Yes, absolutely, Chuck. That's some great advice. Does anyone have anything to add about, leading teams during this time and help your staff avoid burnout?
I hope I get invited to this next margarita night, Chuck. I don't have anything to say on managerial skills, but I'm sure I could learn some there.
Well, I didn't get to answer the other one about how it affected personally. I was going to mention that at least in South Carolina, many other states too, liquor stores were essential. And that whole thing about the quarantine 15, those are my peeps right there. So that's how a lot of us deal with stress.
Yes, absolutely. I have a 7-year-old, and she would, love buying all the sweets during this time. So every time we came home, I had cupcakes or cake or.
and cooking has taken off, right? People are making their own bread and experimenting with new things. And I'm talking with the FedEx guy about, what people are getting, and it's good stuff.
No, it's great. So Jamila, I wanted to go back to question 2 with you to kind of talk about, because I know you just have, a wealth of experience in handling burnout, setting boundaries. What is some of your advice about the things that you've done in the past to avoid burnout?
Sure, yes. In the setting boundaries, that's a key point that you just said. Really, in the past, there was a moment where I know I stretched myself way too thin. Like outside of my engineering work demands, I had leadership roles in several professional associations at one time. And, from my review of articles on this topic, I learned that extreme commitment resulting in people neglecting their own needs may also be at the root of burnout. And, this burnout can manifest in your health. So to combat this, I've learned to balance my roles. I'll play a leadership role in one organization, act as a participant in others. Sometimes it's just fun to go to the party and not have to plan it. Or sometimes I respectfully decline, for the sake of my well-being. And I think of it like, securing an oxygen mask before helping others in a plane emergency. And on top of that, I try to do a little yoga too, like Aaron. Sometimes I don't get to rolling out my full mat. I found some very convenient standing yoga positions that help. Or, just stopping to breathe 10 times, when I'm starting to feel some kind of anxiety.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I found exercise to be extremely important during this time. So the next question I'll move to, and again, please share any questions in the chat box. I know this is something that everyone experiences and is going through. So if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. So please put your questions in the chat box. But the next one that I'll move to is the current COVID-19 situation is introducing new stressors to lots of people. And I know within the past week, there's been a lot more stressors and things to think about, and change that needs to happen. How have you communicated to your employer when these stressors are impacting you, so they can help you navigate or overcome them? So Aaron, I'll go ahead and turn to you. What's the best way that you've communicated to your employer?
Yeah, so really just communicating often, I think, is the biggest key. We have weekly team meetings that we have for our divisions, and I'm a water wastewater engineer, and so we have weekly meetings. We used to have just monthly meetings, and we've kicked that up during this time frame just to make sure everyone's staying connected and know what's going on. And so that's been really beneficial, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then just talking with my boss about if I've got a lot going on coming up, making sure that they're aware of that. So I think that just making sure that everyone communicates very frequently is probably key.
Yeah, that's great advice. Communication, I think, during this time has been so very important. Chuck, what are some of your thoughts about communicating with your employer about what you're facing personally?
Like I said, my situation has been a little bit different. Not having a lot of stress. Well, stress that's negative. A lot of we got married to. She's over my my left shoulder, my right shoulder, to a fellow ASCE from Region 5, Melissa Wheeler. And so she just switched kind of her job. So stressor 1, stressor 2. We moved into a new house, stressor 3. And we've been just overjoyed using those stressors as positive changes in our lives. And they haven't really been, I haven't thought of them as stressors. I thought of them as, new challenges that keep us excited. Going outside and being, doing the things you do with a new house has been fun to do. But so I haven't had that burden to bring to my employer saying, hey, I need this time, or I've got dealing with this. But from a managerial perspective, as I said previously, being able to understand that the situations affect people differently, I think that's good. And as Kyle mentioned, the quote unquote new normal, whatever that might be, it's definitely going to include some type of allowances from working from home. And what I think that means is, like in Aaron's case, if the kids are home for the summer, I think we're going to say, you get to work from home this summer, or whatever. I mean, we're going to have to value that employee role in that employee and employer relationship a little bit differently. Thank God, I think the cube farms or hot boxes or whatever you call it, office situation may be a thing of the past. I don't think anybody wants to share anybody's desk space with anybody else's for the coming future. So, from an engineering perspective, that's, thinking about all the office changes and people that are going to need help with reentry plans, and where do you hold visitors in a warm room until they're good to go to the back, and all this kind of weird stuff going on. But that's, kind of how we've been dealing with what does coming back look like, and how are we going to change how we've typically run things day to day. I think have been the issues that I've talked with, my managers about, and how to deal with, we want to keep our good employees, right? And how to make them feel comfortable in whatever this new normal might be that on the other side of this. I'm not sure if that answered it on point, but that's what most of my day is taken up with.
No, I mean, that's great advice. And, I think that's the things that a lot of managers are thinking about right now, is how to, make your employees comfortable. And that's really important as you're trying to accommodate them and try to make sure no one does get burnt out. So, I mean, I think that's great that those are things that you're thinking about, and, hopefully everyone's thinking about them. Jamila or Kyle, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I think that checking in with your employees is the best thing. And at my company, at WSP USA, they conducted a survey and to kind of take the pulse of everyone. And the thing I like about surveys is that there's some anonymity there. So you will get, open, honest concerns from people, so that they don't have to divulge, their private information, say like there may be extra health concerns. Maybe they're in a, high risk group. So maybe they don't want to broadcast that, but a survey is a great way to collect that kind of feedback, so that then the company can shape their response to the COVID situation, and how people, eventually recover from it, and how the company returns to, their new form of working.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, Chuck, you had some great advice about, your management style and some of the things that you're doing. Question in the chat box is kind of the other side of that, if you will. The other day I was talking with another coworker. We're in different situations. Our managers are either micromanaging or not quite managing at all. What advice do you have for each of us in these situations? Does anyone, Chuck, do you have any advice to give? It looks like you're...
I'd rather work for the second person. I don't know how you micromanage from afar. I don't think that is a very efficient use of either party's time. I would think this is going to be some hard learned lessons for managers too. If that's your style, you've got to be crazy right now, or driving yourself crazy trying to get all that done, or driving your employees nuts doing it. So I think the advice would be have a heart-to-heart with the manager A, and say, look, I'm getting my work done. It makes it tougher when you're calling me every 15 minutes to check in or do this. I've got to block out. Maybe that what we've been talking about is segment. Don't call me from 9 to 12. I'm working on your stuff right here, and that's my time for you. Let's talk about that and appreciate that. Send me an email, whatever. But that's how I would handle it if it got to be a problem. And if they're not managing at all, it's to a point where your team is inefficient, I say that's a role that I'd like to see, especially people on this phone call, our participants through ASCE, step into that role. Go ahead and show some leadership. And even though that you're not getting paid for it, that's not your role. Be the manager for your group that's not being managed. Do it. And then put your resume out there and quit. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's great. I did read an article the other day talking about how, working remotely sometimes makes micromanaging even worse as far as micromanagement goes, as it makes, and anyways, it was a very, very interesting article. I'll have to find it and share it in the chat box. But Jamila, do you have any thoughts on that? It looked like you kind of...
Yeah, I did. I've experienced being micromanaged. And for me, it got to a point where I made an Excel sheet, and I would do a tick mark, every time this person would come by my desk within an hour, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy, or that, I was over. Am I, I needed some data points for myself. So once I did that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he definitely came by 8 times in the span of an hour, after asking me to complete a task. That's when I said, you know what, I'm going to I really agree with Chuck, have just a straightforward, heart to heart type of conversation. And that's what I did. One time we were in the kitchen he was getting his lunch. He had a sandwich in his hand, and I said, if I came by your desk 8 times while you tried to eat that sandwich, do you think you would ever finish? And that live example, I think it really hit home for him. And we were able to have a very pleasant work experience, after that. So, it's just about having, being straightforward sometimes. I mean, so that you can be more productive at work, because we spend, a lot of time there. And remotely, I would say, Chuck had a great advice there to try to maybe set a time to discuss these things with your manager, so that then they're not encroaching it several times during the day. So you guys both have expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. The person that asked the question said, thank you so much, Chuck. That was a great answer. Jamila, again, I like the idea of doing the little check mark. A lot of times you're like, is it just me? Am I overreacting? But,
Yeah.
It proves you're not crazy anyway,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So here's another question in the chat. What are symptoms of burnout engineers and engineering managers should be looking for? Most engineering managers haven't been trained in anything related to mental health and find those topics uncomfortable at best. Many engineers are tempted to push through until they have a major health issue and may have difficulty telling what is normal stress and burnout level. Kyle, you're shaking your head. Is that something that you want to speak to?
I'm not sure if I'm actually even qualified, being in the managerial arena for a little less than a year on this, but I was shaking my head more to the end piece of many engineers are tempted to push through until they have a major health issue. And I completely agree with that, because I personally don't think I would just come forward as an engineer working at some place and just say that I feel one way, right? And that could be for whatever reason, societal standards or whatever it is, just in terms of pushing through. But I agree with Stephanie's question. I'm just afraid that I might not be the person to answer this.
Yeah, Chuck, is this something that you've dealt with? Do you look for signs of burnout in your staff?
Yeah, you can kind of pick up on it, but part of me thinks, and we're all in this together, right? As civil engineers, engineers by their nature are pretty quirky animals anyway, right? I mean, all of us are a little bit different. We're kind of the round peg in the square hole in most situations, and making it through, admittedly, the tougher classes at college that most of our friends did. I think we're used to stress and have dealt with it. I think being in this business teaches you that if you're successful at it, you have dealt with stress a long time, on different things. Engineering project management. Oh my gosh, the list is, there's 40 things you got to do at least average to be a successful project manager, and it's really we deal with stress a lot. Yes, this is different, and this is a lot at one time. But I think we're up for that challenge. And I'm not trying to ignore the fact that we don't see stress in people, but I think engineers are by nature a lot more resilient than we tend to give them credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, do you have any signs of burnout that you look for in staff? I know you're also involved in, local leadership as well. I know it's probably looking at volunteers too, as far as signs of burnout. Do you have anything to share?
Well, I would say, talk to them and see what they're doing on their free time. If they're always working, that might be a sign. Are they doing anything for fun? Are they actually getting some, downtime? Or, I was talking to a coworker. She lives by herself. She's working from home, and I just reached out to her and I said, how are things going? Just ask, see how things are going, and they'll let you know. If you've got a good relationships to start with, for sure, they'll let you know how things are going, and just, thinking about those people that might be either really quiet or maybe have a lot of tension where they may get upset a lot. Maybe those are kind of the two extremes that stress can kind of induce. And so keeping an eye out for that might be something that you can do as well. That might be a little bit more difficult if you're not around them, but if you're on the phone with them, just have some conversations and listen for some key things, and that might be able to help.
That's great advice. I mean, you don't know unless you ask, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Mm-hmm.
And Jamila, I know you have thought a lot about burnout. Do you have certain traits that you look for, if you will, with burnout? How do you tell the difference personally if you're just stressed or facing actual burnout?
Probably if I feel fatigued. Or if I'm having restless nights. I also have strange dreams when I'm burned out. So those are some of the signs that I look for. I really just kind of check in with my body and let it tell me. It tells me, it speaks to me. When you stop and listen, and it kind of gives you advice as to what you should pull back on or not. So I guess in others, if you're noticing their schedules and they're working a lot, you see them sending emails at, the middle of the night, and maybe they're tired then the next day on a call. I mean, those kinds of things could be triggers or flags rather.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch our focus to what we can do in the future, especially in this new environment facing the new normal. I think, in the chat, we're seeing maybe the best thing we can do is go to Chuck's house for a margarita happy hour to fight burnout. We're going to invite ourselves over. I've seen your fire pit, Chuck, through Facebook, and it looks great. We're all gonna go have an anti-burnout party at your house. But the next question that I do want to ask is, what advice would you give engineers who are facing burnout during COVID-19? What can we do to set up for success in the new normal? Jamila, do you want to go ahead and speak to that?
Sure. I have 4 pieces of advice. One, find a healthy outlet outside of work. For me, this means exploring the arts. For example, I took a virtual course about creating documentaries during this period. And I also love arts and crafts. And I got a Cricut. You'll have to learn more about the Cricut, but you can do amazing things with that little machine. The second piece of advice is look outside of oneself to prevent burnout. For me, this means, having conversations with my family and friends and coworkers to understand their concerns and, find ways to give back in other people's time of need. The third piece of advice I would say is to have gratitude. I try to reflect on what I'm thankful for, particularly on days like this. On my birthdays, I use them as checkpoints, and I look around to see all of the things that I'm thankful for, such as having a sound home to work from in the first place. This also means for me praying often. And lastly, I'll say connect with nature. There were a few weeks where I realized I had not stepped outside at all. I live in an apartment building on the top floor, and I don't have a balcony. But then there was a point where the outside actually came to me. A little sparrow somehow entered my apartment, but I saw it as a reminder for me to step outside. So those are the pieces of advice I have for preventing burnout.
Yeah, that's great. Kyle, what advice do you have?
Yeah, so just to stage this, I do think everyone's different, right? So I think my advice is up the same alley as Jamila's, maybe slightly different though. And to kind of stage this is I think I'm a humanitarian, an optimist, and an opportunist, right? I would try to use those three words. And I would say, given that, I think this is an opportunity for us to do all sorts of new things that we haven't even explored, right? You're getting closer with family. I can't tell you last time I called my mom or dad 4 or 5 times in a single week in a long time, right? So we're able to get on top of that. We're also able to learn all these new skills and even support events and to just really to now support things that matter to us. We'll say that. And I think this is all big things that matter to the individual in life. And lastly, probably would help your managers and your company at the end of the day being a more productive individual. And I think we'll figure out from studies here, going forward. I'm sure many will be out. So yeah, I'd say that.
Absolutely, that's great. I mean, I think being outside, like Jamila was saying, has been really important for me personally. Erin, did you have anything to add?
Sure. I mean, I definitely am. I'm a nature person. I like to get outside. And so that's something that I'm drawn to as well. I also, along with engineering, I also delineate wetlands. So it is kind of one of my passions to be outside and to be with nature. And so we've been doing some yard projects. We've neglected some of the landscaping over the years. And so we're tackling that stuff and dividing plants and, putting something on our neighborhood Facebook page and saying, hey, we've got these available if anyone wants it, and helping other people because everyone else is, kind of cleaning up their yard too. So just, getting outside or, I also, you look at podcasts or different webcasts that kind of are geared towards, mental health. So I've been tuning into some of those and, you feel like maybe you're on Zoom meetings or calls all of the time, but when you're doing something like that, you've got your phone, you've got headphones on. I go to the store while I'm, watching one of these things because I'm not really talking to anyone with my mask on anyways, and I'm checking out at the grocery store on my own. So at one of the self-serve kiosks, so it's actually kind of freeing. I can go and listen to a 2-hour podcast and just go about some daily tasks while I'm doing that. So that's been a unique find that I've identified. So. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. For me, one of the highlights of my weeks have been, going grocery shopping by myself. It's funny. It's the little things that you sort of like, oh, this is an hour where I can just be by myself. Oh, anyways, you did talk on Zoom fatigue. Ironically, there's a question in the chat box about that. So how are you as a manager trying to prevent your staff from experiencing Zoom fatigue, or how are you as a team member trying to influence how your team does its work now that many of us are working in a virtual environment? I've heard of teams doing talking and walking meetings on the regular phone instead of always doing video calls. What would you recommend? Kyle, you talked about, your team. What has your philosophy been?
Yeah, I actually love that about the walking and talking meetings. I'm here in Morgantown, West Virginia, and we have a ton of hiking trails here and backwoods trails just all around. And what I've began doing is just stacking meetings, right? So I'll stack meetings 3, 4, 5, and I'll take a 2, 3, 4 mile walk, and I'll just go conversation after conversation right there on the phone. And if it's Zoom, I'll have it on my phone and I'll take notes right there. And I think that is a good and effective strategy. It allows you to get outside, still plan time with friends outside of that area, but still get work done. And that's been very effective for myself, and I know several of our team members.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck, did you have anything to add?
I kind of keying what I said before is, I don't like the interruption of Zoom and Teams all the time. If I'm working on a spreadsheet or a document, it pops right up in the middle of my screen, and it's so comforting to hear the phone ring once in a while. So I use the phone a lot, the old school phone. It's still VoIP, but it's a telephone with a cord and all, or your cell phone to call people. And even if I know they're working or work, I use that. And we had an honest to God conference call the other day with like 3 people that I connected on the telephone to talk. It was so refreshing. I thought they thought it was refreshing too. It's a little bit different. It's crazy that's old school is the new thing, but that works for me.
Yeah, whoever would have thought that would be refreshing, those old school conference calls. But
I
they
think
really are.
that too, actually. If you've got a laptop, just take it into a different room. Like, I kind of get tired of the room that I'm in. I have rearranged it a couple of times, so I have a better view out the window depending on the seasons, or, go take it outside to the deck or a patio, just to get a different view while you're, on a Zoom meeting. I mean, I've got my desktop and 2 monitors here sitting at my desk, and, if I don't need to have all of that stuff for a Zoom call, you can be a little bit more portable. You can take it somewhere else where you can just have a breath of fresh air with a different environment around you.
Awesome. So there's a question in the chat box, safety, question mark. I'm assuming that is talking about walking and talking at the same time. Kyle, do you have any thoughts on making sure that we're being safe pedestrians?
I'll stick to my comments before, but I think it all comes down to the individual. And I think that if you feel like you've mastered some of the skill set of walking and talking on these trails and things, and I think that's awesome, and applaud you on the back for that, and you should continue it. But if not, I definitely don't suggest going outside and doing that, and stick to the Zoom meetings in the house and maybe allocate some other time for that. I think that's a great question, though. I think that makes sense.
Walk and talk at your own risk. Oh, goodness. Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up because I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So maybe if everyone can take 1 to 2 minutes to kind of share their closing thoughts or their takeaways about burnout in the new normal and what we can do to prevent it, both within yourself and your staff. Erin, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. Yeah. I just recommend, listening to yourself, identifying some stressors, some key stressors. If you're not good at identifying your stressors, maybe you go and get a blood pressure cuff and you check your blood pressure every once in a while just to make sure. And definitely it was something that I had to learn to identify in myself. So I would just say, 10 breaths if you're feeling stressed out, or if you feel like you're not breathing or catching enough air, just take 10 breaths and reset yourself. So, yeah. Doesn't have to take a lot of time. You just need to take a little break every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamila, did you have anything, or I should say closing thoughts, Jamila? I know this is a topic that you're very passionate about. I'm interested to hear what your takeaways are. Uh-oh, it looks like she's frozen again.
Oh, no.
No. All right. Well, Kyle, I'll go ahead and turn to you next. Do you want to share some of your takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has been a very interesting time to watch how the world reacts during this time of COVID-19. And I really, really am an optimist to the core, and think that at the end of the day, all of humanity is going to come out better because of an event such as this. And we're going to find new ways to be productive and to do things and to prevent these things from happening in the future. And just, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, I'm going to continue to take this in stride and learning new things, and just reiterate what everyone's saying, to get outside for a time. I've grew up on screens my entire life, and it has been refreshing to go from my once hard charging self to being a little more of an earth walker and flower smeller, and I enjoy it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. I know, a lot of times everyone was constantly on their screen, right? And it really takes a pandemic for people to go ahead and get outside and really enjoy the nature. I've definitely seen more of that now.
Crazy to think that.
No, it's ridiculous. But definitely love seeing the pictures of people out and about, especially, Jamila is in DC right now, but, people walking around the mall, and definitely enjoying nature. Chuck, it looks like Jamila is still not with us.
Oh, she's going to try again.
Oh boy. Okay.
Are you back?
I'm back.
Yay!
Gosh. My
Awesome.
connection has been so patchy. But here I am. Okay, sorry about that, guys.
No, you're fine,
All
Jamila.
right.
The sparrow got into your router.
I better make my final thoughts before it shuts off again. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
We can hear you now. We'll go ahead and turn to you, Jamila.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, in the face of all this adversity, a good laugh goes a long way for me at releasing stress and preventing burnout. And I think it will for lots of folks. And, I know who to call and I know what to watch for my laughs. Also, with actionable steps, I think we can use this time, as a good opportunity to reset and heal our nation, and really just stay safe and be kind.
Absolutely. Being kind. It's like so simple, right? Like, Chuck, I'll go ahead and turn to you. What are some of your closing thoughts, action items? How can we avoid burnout during COVID-19?
Certainly. And just like Jamila and Aaron said, we are taking all that in stride, dealing with it. But I'm going to echo what Kyle said. I'm an optimist. I'm very much a people person, and no hugging and staying distances for people. It's going to be hard for people like me to do. I really get a lot of energy from people, and I so much miss ASCE, not going to meetings. I saw a letter from Guna and Tom this week. Was it Guna that the cuffs are off and we may start planning some meetings here later on? I think that's wonderful.
Based on local restrictions or whatever.
Yeah, based on local restrictions. I think that's great. And I think it's funny how that also mimics what I tell our folks about in the consulting industry, the seller-doer model. Your clients are freaked out too, right? We're in a relationship marketing business, and your clients become your friends, or engineers are your friends. And, yes, it's okay to talk to them about how you're doing and what are your stressors, but I'd so much rather talk about the margarita later on, and having fun and cherishing those times, because as we found out, it's fragile. It really is. And I don't think I'm going to take that lightly in the future. It would be my takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing that, maybe is the most unsettling, is just how fragile the world is. But thank you all for joining us today. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts and your perspectives. This has been a great panel and a great discussion. I did want to encourage everyone that ASC members can continue this conversation on ASC Collaborate. And then for those of you who are not members, I'd be happy to talk to you about the benefits and resources that ASC offers. You're welcome to contact me at Austin, TAUSTIN at ASCE.org if you have any questions about how ASCE can support you during these difficult times. I did put in the chat, next week we will be talking about finances during COVID-19, so I really hope everyone is able to join us for that. Thanks again, everyone. This has been a great panel. I really appreciate all of your time. So stay safe, everyone.